Picture this for a moment. A sprawling, sun-soaked Los Angeles boulevard in the late 1930s, teeming with cars the size of boats and the echo of big band horns drifting out of storefront radios. A young Dustin Lee Hoffman has just arrived into the world, August 8th, 1937. Born to a father who used to manage props at Columbia Pictures, and a mother who would loom as a resolute guiding figure behind her son's eventual Hollywood journey. No one at the time could have guessed that this small, unassuming child, whose family had deep Jewish roots tracing back to places like Kiev, Ukraine, and Iași, Romania, would one day upend the entire definition of movie stardom. Think of a short, curly-haired kid, overshadowed by a well-meaning but discouraged father who later sold furniture, and an older brother who'd grow up to be a lawyer and economist. They were Jewish by heritage, but in a casual sense, religious traditions weren't deeply observed in their home, and Dustin himself would recall that he basically discovered he was Jewish around age 10. A near-comedic anecdote sees him mention that there were practically no holiday festivities of any kind. It was a standard working-class existence, a million miles away from the theaters and bright lights that would soon dominate his destiny. There was one complication, though. Dustin Hoffman wanted to become a pianist. That was the grand ambition back in his teenage years, when he studied classical piano and toyed with the idea of spending his life behind the ivory keys. But to his dismay, he wasn't blessed with the ear for music, nor the natural artistry that classical success demanded. It was as if fate was tapping him on the shoulder, whispering, "Kid, you're just not that kind of prodigy." Yet, ironically, that same shortcoming would propel him toward the world of acting, a place where every ounce of his creativity, vulnerability, and boundless ambition would find a home. He graduated from Los Angeles High School in 1955, and, in a move that was standard for young Americans of the time, he enrolled at Santa Monica College. The original plan was pre-med, maybe to become a doctor. But can you imagine Dustin Hoffman, the eventual king of the neurotic, high-strung, quick-talking screen persona, spending his life with scalpels and stethoscopes? It wasn't going to happen. He dabbled in acting classes. He figured they'd be an easy A. And then, boom, the acting bug bit him. That spark proved so irresistible that he soon left college to chase a new ambition. Others in the family, including his Aunt Pearl, reportedly said, "You can't be an actor. You're not good-looking enough." But Hoffman, despite harboring insecurities about his looks and height, wasn't about to let that deter him. The next step? The Pasadena Playhouse, an incubator for raw talent. There, young Hoffman found himself alongside future Academy Award winner Gene Hackman. The two had no illusions of grandeur. They simply wanted to act, maybe carve out a small, respectable career if they were lucky. Soon after, Hackman left for New York City, and Hoffman followed in his wake, lured by the city's off-Broadway scene. You can almost imagine these two guys, later joined by Robert Duvall, living in cramped apartments, hustling from audition to audition, doubting themselves even as they quietly hoped for that big break. In those early years, the trifecta of Hoffman, Hackman, and Duvall formed a kind of brotherhood. All three would eventually become revered leading men, but at the time, they were just struggling nobodies. Hoffman could barely land a job. He wasn't tall, he wasn't conventionally handsome, and he certainly wasn't the type that Hollywood bigwigs pictured as a classic matinee idol. He scraped by, doing menial work, teaching occasionally, and bagging the odd small part on television. While Hackman might have exuded a certain rugged appeal, and Duvall had a very direct, commanding presence, Hoffman was described in comedic terms: small, wiry, anxious. He would later recall how these rejections piled up, forcing him to develop a thick skin. Still, the small roles he snagged propelled him toward building technique. He was studying method acting at the Actors Studio under Lee Strasberg, intensifying his devotion to the craft. Eventually, the stage welcomed him. He served as an assistant director for some productions, appeared in summer stock, took on random off-Broadway gigs. One of the earliest major off-Broadway hits he snagged was A, for which he won a Drama Desk Award, an early sign that the kid from LA had range and could hold his own on stage. He also had bit parts in television and small film roles, including The Tiger Makes Out, 1967. We can picture him then, young but certainly no typical leading man, still scraping, still hustling, all the while igniting a tiny flame that would soon blow up into a roaring fire. Imagine the turning point. It's 1967. Director Mike Nichols has established some credibility as a brilliant mind in show business. He's auditioning people for a new Broadway musical called The Apple Tree. Hoffman tries out for a singing part, but Nichols quickly realizes this guy doesn't exactly have the vocal chops for a stage musical. That might have been the end of it if Nichols hadn't glimpsed something in Hoffman, some intangible quality, an offbeat energy. Nichols filed that impression away and, by some stroke of destiny, decided Dustin Hoffman was perfect to play Benjamin Braddock in the film The Graduate. This was a pivotal moment for the trajectory of modern cinema. The Graduate soared into theaters at the tail end of 1967, and everything changed for Hoffman overnight. This role, an aimless young college graduate, adrift in a sea of adult hypocrisy, seduced by Mrs. Robinson, tormented by the future. The part tapped into a sense of generational confusion that millions of Americans felt in the late 1960s. Hoffman's awkward gestures, his anxious stammer, his distinct lack of the typical Hollywood veneer, these were exactly what made the performance so striking. Critics raved, audiences were captivated, and The Graduate became a cultural phenomenon, capturing the zeitgeist of an era that was questioning everything from authority to personal identity. The result? Dustin Hoffman got an Oscar nomination, though it ultimately went to Rod Steiger for In the Heat of the Night. That golden trophy might have eluded him that year, but the real prize was catapulting into the A-list. Suddenly, he symbolized a new wave of leading men, actors who didn't fit the cookie-cutter mold of Cary Grant or Rock Hudson. There was a sense of gritty realism about him, an endearing relatability. Hollywood woke up to a fresh standard. Leading guys could be less than 6 feet tall, could have a non-classic face, could radiate frenetic energy. Hoffman fit that bill, and from there, it was off to the races. During this short period after The Graduate, he famously returned to stage acting, vowing not to let stardom derail his passion for live theater. But the film world beckoned, and the offers came rolling in. He took on Midnight Cowboy, 1969, playing Ratso Rizzo, a pitiable street hustler in a wheelchair, opposite Jon Voight's naive Texan Joe Buck. This was a staggering departure from the well-bred confusion of Ben Braddock. In fact, it was so diametrically opposite that many critics initially assumed Hoffman couldn't do it. He wasn't a real actor, they alleged, just some lucky kid who'd stumbled upon the perfect role in The Graduate. But John Schlesinger, who directed Midnight Cowboy, saw the potential. Hoffman, ever the method actor, went to extremes to convince Schlesinger of his ability. He showed up in Times Square, disguised as a derelict, unkempt, and stumbling. Schlesinger was won over, and the performance Hoffman delivered became one of the cinematic landmarks of the era. Ratso Rizzo is an emblem of desperation and tragedy, culminating in that heartbreaking final scene on the bus. The film itself was so impactful, it won the Oscar for Best Picture. Hoffman's second nomination might not have netted him the statue, But his transformation from the graduate's naive boy to Midnight Cowboy's streetwise hustler proved that no one could corner Dustin Hoffman into a type. He was unequivocally an actor's actor. The 1970s saw him in roles like Little Big Man, 1970, where his character aged from a teenager to a withered 121-year-old man, Lenny, 1974, where he played the controversial comedian Lenny Bruce, garnering yet another Academy Award nomination, and Straw Dogs, 1971, a gritty and unsettling thriller that further showcased Hoffman's capacity for intensity. As the decade progressed, he took part in All the President's Men, 1976, alongside Robert Redford, portraying Washington Post reporter Carl Bernstein and shining a light on the Watergate scandal. It was a film that practically invented the modern political thriller. Hoffman's on-screen synergy with Redford was electric, a perfect demonstration of his ability to anchor a story that transcended mere entertainment. By this point, Hollywood recognized him not just as a movie star, but as an actor who gave each role a shattering realism. Then came Marathon Man, 1976, reuniting him with director John Schlesinger. He played Babe Levy, a history grad student unwittingly plunged into a world of Nazis and stolen jewels, culminating in that infamous torture scene with the chilling Laurence Olivier. The legend goes that Hoffman, to get the right mindset of a tortured, exhausted man, deprived himself of sleep. Olivier famously suggested, "Why not just try acting?" a line that became a showbiz anecdote for the next half-century. But it typifies Hoffman's approach. He'll do what it takes to inhabit a role, even if it means pushing himself to physical or emotional limits. As the 1970s gave way to the 1980s, we see Hoffman more widely embraced by the mainstream. And how could he not be? He racked up success after success, culminating in an unforgettable turn in Kramer vs. Kramer, 1979. Here he was, playing a workaholic father who must learn to care for his son after his wife, played by Meryl Streep, walks out. The film resonated across the cultural landscape. Divorce and child custody were topics hitting an American nerve. The movie itself earned the Best Picture Oscar, and Dustin Hoffman finally scored that elusive Best Actor trophy. He'd recalled going through a real-life divorce at the time, transferring a raw authenticity into his performance, so much so that many viewers believed they were witnessing a slice of life, not fiction. By the early 1980s, he proved he could pivot to comedy with Tootsie, 1982, where he portrayed a desperate actor who dresses as a woman to land a soap opera role. It was comedic gold. Michael Dorsey, his on-screen persona, was edgy, contrarian, intense, and yet heartbreakingly earnest in his quest to simply get a job. The result was more Oscar nominations, more box office success, and an affirmation of Hoffman's comedic timing. Tootsie remains one of those definitive comedic works of the 1980s, a testament to how Dustin Hoffman could shift seamlessly between heartbreak and hilarity. Yet for all that success, Hoffman was no stranger to controversies and career ups and downs. In the late 1980s, Elaine May's Ishtar, 1987, was widely panned, though he and Warren Beatty, his co-star, tried valiantly to defend it. It became one of Hollywood's most famous big-budget flops, at least in the eyes of critics and tabloids. Still, even a fiasco like Ishtar didn't torpedo Hoffman's reputation. Many eventually found it to have a cult comedic charm, and Hoffman simply shrugged and moved on. Then came one of his greatest roles ever, the 1988 film Rain Man, directed by Barry Levinson. Playing Raymond Babbitt, an autistic savant with a knack for numbers, Hoffman delivered one of the most nuanced, empathetic, and thoroughly studied performances in American cinema. He spent 2 years preparing for the role, interacting with autistic individuals, absorbing their mannerisms, and shaping them into a layered character who felt heartbreakingly real. Tom Cruise played his brash, self-centered brother, but it was Hoffman who held the emotional center. Rain Man won Best Picture, and Hoffman earned his second Best Actor Oscar. By that time, he was in his 50s, firmly established as one of the era's defining talents. He had moved from an anxious, starry-eyed kid to a revered Hollywood veteran with multiple accolades under his belt. Then the 1990s arrived, and Hoffman, now somewhat older, continued to work at an impressive clip, though the roles shifted. He played Captain Hook in Steven Spielberg's Hook, 1991, with a flamboyant twist, starred in Outbreak, 1995, as an Army medical doctor fighting a lethal virus, and took comedic turns in Wag the Dog, 1997. That film, directed by Barry Levinson, had him portraying a Hollywood producer roped into fabricating a fake war to divert attention from a presidential scandal. It was a black comedy that gave Hoffman yet another Oscar nomination, demonstrating that, even after decades in the business, he was still pushing boundaries. Throughout this stretch of his career, he embraced voice acting too, though he was at first reluctant about working in animation. In 2008, he lent his gravelly yet expressive voice to Master Shifu in Kung Fu Panda and the film Sword. Audiences loved the comedic interplay between Jack Black's bumbling Po and Hoffman's stern, introspective Shifu. He recognized an acting challenge even in voice work and won an Annie Award for it. This success led to reappearances in subsequent Kung Fu Panda entries, ensuring that even children's entertainment had a healthy dose of Hoffman's talent. If there's a single recurring theme in Dustin Hoffman's life and career, it's that shape-shifting dedication. He could be a father learning the ropes in Kramer versus Kramer, a restless comedian in Lenny, a flamboyant pirate in Hook, or a fussy theater veteran disguised as a soap opera actress in Tootsie. The chameleon-like ability to morph into these drastically different characters is precisely what sets him apart. The actor who was once told he wasn't handsome enough or tall enough for leading roles wound up rewriting the very definitions of what a leading man could be. Yet, as we move deeper into his story, there's another dimension that complicates the narrative: a series of controversies. The biggest wave hit in 2017 when multiple women accused Hoffman of sexual misconduct. Some stories involved claims that he made inappropriate remarks or crossed personal boundaries on set. One accuser was only 17 at the time. Hoffman apologized to her, stating that it wasn't reflective of who he is, while also publicly defending himself at times. Another story that circulated recounted tension on the set of Kramer versus Kramer, including an incident where Meryl Streep allegedly felt violated or overly provoked by Hoffman in service of the performance. Later clarifications from Streep's representatives indicated that while there was an offense and an apology, some details were misrepresented. Nonetheless, the wave of allegations inevitably cast a shadow over Hoffman's once pristine legacy. In a now famous public Q&A moderated by comedian John Oliver, Hoffman found himself blindsided by direct questions about these allegations. Oliver pressed him, wanting more than the classic "it's not who I am" line. Hoffman, clearly uncomfortable, felt that he was being treated like a man already found guilty. The exchange became a widely shared moment that exemplified the Me Too era's demand for accountability. For longtime fans who revered Hoffman's artistry, it was jarring. Here was the cultural icon, a symbol of unyielding commitment to authenticity, forced to confront the possibility that in his personal interactions he may have fallen short of the respect and decency he once championed in his roles. This controversy weighs heavily in any contemporary discussion of Dustin Hoffman, overshadowing some of the triumphs that once defined him. And it raises a larger question about our relationship with beloved actors who are implicated in problematic off-camera behavior. Do we separate the art from the artist? Hoffman is by no means the first to grapple with such moral complexities, nor will he be the last. Yet for those who followed his journey from the wide-eyed days of The Graduate to the multiple Oscar victories, it felt like the final chapters of his legacy had taken a tragic detour. Another trial in Hoffman's life was his bout with cancer in 2013, which he kept relatively private but survived. That health scare was not widely publicized until he had successfully been treated. Such personal challenges remind us that behind the roles, behind the accolades, is a human being with vulnerabilities. Hoffman's still making occasional appearances in film and on television, choosing projects with more selectivity. In 2012, he made his directorial debut with Quartet, a sweet, understated comedy drama about retired opera singers. It was a pleasant success, warmly received by critics and audiences, featuring the likes of Maggie Smith and Michael Gambon. He continued to appear in roles like the Netflix film The Meyerowitz Stories, 2017, directed by Noah Baumbach, where critics again marveled at his ability to portray complicated paternal figures. His comedic timing, ironically, found new life in cameo appearances and voice roles, bridging younger audiences who might know him only as Master Shifu from Kung Fu Panda. Hoffman's personal life has had its highs and lows. He was married to Anne Byrne, adopting her daughter, before that relationship ended. Later, he married Lisa Gottsagen, with whom he had several children. For a time, they lived a relatively quiet family life in New York. He once said that hugging a child gave him the kind of instant rush that was better than any drug. A child's love is like a drug, he stated. Dustin Hoffman's contributions to cinema are nothing short of legendary. His work has inspired generations of actors, and his characters have left an indelible mark on film history. Though his later years have been quieter and filled with personal reflection, his legacy continues to thrive. What's your favorite Dustin Hoffman performance? Let us know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this deep dive, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more stories about Hollywood's most unforgettable stars. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.